Kara had never thought of herself as particularly brave. She wasn't one of those women you read about in books, resilient, unshakable, fierce. No, Kara was ordinary. A vet technician who loved animals more than people, a mother to a toddler she adored, a quiet woman living in the corners of her own life. But she had survived Mark. Mark was charming when they met. Not handsome, but confident. The kind of man who looked you in the eye when he asked your name and held your gaze just a second too long. At first, Kara mistook that intensity for passion. He brought her flowers, left sweet notes on her car windshield, asked questions like he really cared. And she fell hard and fast. But as the months passed, the charm turned sour. Mark didn't like when she went out without him. He didn't want her talking to other men, even co-workers. He asked for her passwords. He started keeping tabs on her phone calls and texts, telling her it was just to protect what we have. Kara made excuses for him. She was in love. And afraid. When she got pregnant, things got worse. Mark didn't hit her, not physically. But he screamed. He called her names. He broke things. Once, he put his fist through a wall because she didn't answer his call during a vet emergency. Kara began to realize she wasn't safe. After her son was born, she waited 6 more months before she found the courage to leave. She took the baby and fled to a new town. She found a modest rental home outside Olympia, Washington, a small, pale yellow house with creaky floors, a little backyard, and a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. She got a job at a local clinic, enrolled her son in a daycare, and began therapy. Slowly, she began to breathe again. She didn't change her phone number. She told herself it was for convenience, but deep down, she wondered if she was waiting. Waiting to see if Mark would reach out. To apologize. Maybe to change. A year passed. And then one evening, everything changed. It was mid-October. The leaves had turned orange and red, carpeting the sidewalks. Kara had just put her son to bed when the doorbell rang. It was 8:30 p.m. She wasn't expecting anyone. She peered through the peephole and saw a man in his late 30s, holding his phone, looking around nervously. When she opened the door a few inches, he smiled. "You, Kara?" She nodded slowly. "I'm here for the fantasy." Her blood turned to ice. "Excuse me. You posted online. Said to come tonight. Roleplay. You said not to knock, but I figured I'd be polite first." She slammed the door. Bolted it. Backed away in shock. He knocked once more, lightly, then left. That night, she barely slept. The next night, another man came. This one didn't knock. He tried the back door. She called 911, but he was gone by the time police arrived. They were kind but skeptical. Suggested maybe someone had gotten the wrong address. Suggested it might be a prank. But it kept happening. Over the course of a week, 4 more men arrived. All different. All claiming the same thing, that Kara had posted an ad on Craigslist, inviting strangers to fulfill a rape fantasy. The police began to take her seriously. Officers reviewed her home security footage and saw one man peering into windows. Another trying to jiggle a locked back door. One even showed up in broad daylight while her son played inside. Kara was terrified. She moved her son to her sister's house across town and installed cameras and extra locks. The police cyber unit began investigating. They discovered several Craigslist ads posted in the casual encounters section. The descriptions were graphic, disturbing, detailed. They listed her address, described what she looked like, claimed she had a son but that he wouldn't be home. Each ad included chilling instructions: if I scream, don't stop. It's all part of the act. The ads were posted anonymously. The email accounts behind them were created using public computers. But investigators were able to trace one login to a library just a few miles away. They checked security footage and saw a man typing at the terminal. It was Mark. He hadn't disappeared. He had been watching her. Planning. Digital forensics revealed that Mark had created multiple email accounts using aliases that Kara recognized from his past. He had spoofed her email. He had posed as her, writing messages to strangers and encouraging them to assault her under the belief she wanted it. Over a dozen men had responded. Some exchanged emails. Some showed up. One had even brought duct tape. Mark was arrested out of state in a different town under a fake name. He had shaved his head, lost weight, and was using forged documents. When questioned, he admitted what he had done. Claimed he was teaching her a lesson. Claimed she had ruined his life. The case drew national media attention. In court, Kara testified, shaking, her voice low but unwavering. She described the fear, the constant paranoia, the dread of opening her door. She described watching her son grow up behind locked windows. Of being afraid to sleep. The courtroom was silent as the prosecution presented the Craigslist ads. Kara refused to look at Mark. Mental health professionals testified about the psychological impact of prolonged stalking and digital impersonation. They explained how victims experience ongoing trauma, even after the perpetrator is caught. Kara had started therapy again. She suffered from night terrors, flashbacks, panic attacks. She lost her job because she couldn't focus. She stopped answering unknown phone calls. Her relationships faltered. Her trust in the world collapsed. Mark's defense tried to argue diminished capacity. They claimed he was mentally unwell, that he didn't intend for real harm. But the emails showed otherwise. He had provided step-by-step instructions to strangers. Had even drawn a rough floor plan of her home. He had stalked her digital life and physical life for nearly 2 years after they broke up. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Mark was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. Kara didn't cry at the sentencing. She simply walked out of the courtroom and didn't look back. She moved again. This time farther away. She changed her name. Changed her son's name. Left no forwarding address. The government provided resources to help her live under a protected identity. She doesn't post photos online. Doesn't have a social media presence. Doesn't answer her front door. She lives in the shadows of survival. But she lives. Kara's story has since been used in advocacy groups, training programs for law enforcement, and legal reform discussions on cyberstalking. She's never given an on-camera interview. But she once agreed to a written piece with her identity changed. I didn't die. But I don't feel like I lived for years. That man didn't need to touch me to destroy me. All he had to do was make me feel hunted. And he succeeded. Kara continues to advocate for stronger privacy protections and cyberstalking laws. She volunteers with shelters for domestic abuse survivors. She still carries a scar, but not all scars show on the skin. And sometimes, the bravest thing the watcher, who's watching my family. 657 Boulevard was supposed to be a fresh start for the Broaddus family. A dream home in Westfield, New Jersey, a picturesque, safe suburb not far from Manhattan. The house was a sprawling Dutch colonial built in 1905, elegant and quiet. The street was lined with trees, the neighbors polite, the lawns pristine. Derek and Maria Broaddus had worked hard to afford it. Derek, a senior VP at an insurance company in Manhattan, and Maria, a stay-at-home mom, had 3 young kids. They wanted more space and better schools. The $1.3 million home was at the edge of their budget, but it was perfect, or so they thought. Content continues unchanged through previous sections. To this day, the identity of the watcher remains a mystery. Theories, suspicions, and online obsession. When the story broke publicly in 2015, media outlets pounced. Everyone had a theory. The town of Westfield, which prided itself on privacy and wealth, recoiled at the attention. But internet detectives thrived. On Reddit, users dissected every line of the Watcher's letters. Some noted the peculiar phrasing archaic, almost literary, as if someone were playing a long-running role. Others speculated that it could be a neighbor with a grudge or an inheritance dispute. Some even guessed it was Derek himself, trying to create a hoax to escape a bad investment. But that theory didn't hold up. The Broadduses were bleeding money. They'd poured hundreds of thousands into renovations, legal battles, and private investigations. Maria had developed severe anxiety. Derek became paranoid and withdrawn. This was no game to them. They began receiving hate mail from anonymous locals. "Stop bringing shame to our town. This isn't Hollywood, quit making drama." One night, Derek received an anonymous note in his mailbox that simply read, "Leave. Sell. Forget." They suspected everyone. An eccentric man on the corner who kept his curtains drawn. A retired schoolteacher with a telescope. Even neighborhood teens became suspect. The family became isolated. The once idyllic Westfield had turned into a community of eyes, and every pair might belong to the Watcher. The police had little to go on. DNA tests from the envelopes suggested a woman had licked the stamp, but the sample didn't match anyone in databases. A neighbor, Andrea Woods, was tested. A friend of hers. Even a real estate agent. Nothing matched. The language in the letters continued to haunt Derek. He shared them with a forensic linguist, who pointed out that the syntax and vocabulary were consistent with someone older, perhaps over 50. Someone educated. Someone with deep emotional ties to the house. Could it have been a former resident? A descendant of the original owners? Or a neighbor jealous of the Broaddus family's affluence? An obsession that doesn't end. Even after selling the house at a loss, Derek couldn't let it go. He continued to research obsessively. Every strange person he passed in Westfield felt like a suspect. Every Google alert about the address reopened a wound. In 2018, New York Magazine published a detailed exposé. It reignited public interest, and a bidding war for adaptation rights followed. Netflix acquired the rights and produced a series. The show was fictionalized, but the real terror had never relied on fiction. The most terrifying part of the Watcher's story wasn't violence. It was presence. The feeling of being watched. The intimacy of threat without confrontation. The weaponization of anticipation. The final known letter, postmarked several years after the family left, contained one final message. "The house is alive. And I am its voice. Others will come and go. But I am always here." As of today, 657 Boulevard has new occupants. They've reported no letters. No watchers. No disturbances. But the legend of the house remains. It is told in whispers at block parties and debated in true crime forums. And somewhere, someone may still be. Roommate from hell, he never left. It started with an ad. A simple Craigslist post, room for rent. $500/month. All utilities included. Quiet neighborhood. Female preferred. It was 2011. Hannah, a 26-year-old nursing student living in San Diego, had just broken up with her longtime boyfriend. She was desperate for a place to stay but couldn't afford a solo apartment. She emailed the poster. Her name was Natalie. 29. Graduate student. Quiet. Seemed normal. They met at a coffee shop. Natalie was soft-spoken, polite, A little awkward, but so was Hannah. She agreed to move in that weekend. The apartment was a modest 2-bedroom in a nice area near the university. Clean. Sparse. Natalie didn't talk much. She worked nights in the university lab, so they rarely crossed paths. For a few weeks, everything seemed fine. Quiet. Hannah studied, worked her shifts, kept to herself. She felt a little lonely, but at least she had a place. Then, small things began to change. It started with food. Her yogurt disappeared from the fridge. A cereal box was empty when she swore it had just been full. She assumed Natalie was helping herself and felt too awkward to confront her. One night, Hannah came home late from work. The apartment was dark. She went to her room and noticed her desk drawer was slightly open. She didn't remember leaving it that way. Inside was her diary, slightly moved, the ribbon bookmark no longer in the right spot. The next day, her laptop browser history had been wiped. Still, she told herself she was paranoid. Overworked. Sleep deprived. 2 weeks later, she woke up around 3 a.m. Her door was cracked open. She always kept it closed. She got up, walked to the hallway, and saw Natalie's door was also slightly ajar, but the room was empty. The bathroom was empty too. So was the kitchen. But the front door was locked from the inside. She called out softly, "Natalie." No answer. Then, something fell in the hallway closet. She opened it. No one was there. But the coats were oddly bunched together. A small vent cover on the inside wall was loose. She shut the closet quickly. The next day, she texted Natalie to ask where she'd gone last night. Natalie replied, "Was at the lab all night. Sorry if I woke you when I left." Hannah didn't respond. Something didn't feel right. That night, she placed a small piece of tape on her door low, near the floor, barely noticeable. The kind that would break if the door opened. She went to bed. At 2:43 a.m., she woke with a start. She couldn't say why. Just instinct. She checked the tape. Broken. She checked her desk. The diary was gone. She ran into the hallway. Natalie's door was wide open. But the room looked untouched. The bed made. The desk clean. Hannah opened the closet again. Nothing. But the vent cover was now completely unscrewed. Hannah packed a bag and left. She checked into a motel and called the police. She reported a break-in, but with no forced entry or evidence, they did little. She insisted someone had been in her room. She didn't return until 2 days later, accompanied by her brother. They both walked through the apartment. And that's when they found it. Behind the coats in the hall closet, where the vent had been disturbed, they discovered a hidden crawl space. Inside were a used sleeping bag, empty food containers, several of Hannah's missing socks, and her diary. Someone had been living in the walls. Hannah fled. Natalie was nowhere to be found. Police investigated and discovered that Natalie was not a student. Her ID was fake. She'd used an alias. Her rental history was forged. A week later, another report came in from a woman in nearby La Mesa. Her roommate had vanished after she noticed strange activity. And before that, in 2010, a similar Craigslist ad had led to an almost identical situation in Riverside. The police now believed the woman calling herself Natalie was a serial squatter, a manipulator who would forge identities, rent rooms, and slowly infiltrate people's lives. In several cases, she'd created hiding places in crawl spaces, attics, even under floorboards. The scariest part? She never stole anything. Never attacked. She just watched. The investigation went cold. The woman was never found. Hannah moved across the country. changed her name. She never used Craigslist again. She never kept a diary again. And to this day, she keeps tape